Welcome to this ARRI Tech Talk Live on the 10th anniversary of Alexa. Happy birthday, Alexa. My name is Mark Schipper-Mueller. I am the product manager for camera systems here at ARRI. And in the next 30 minutes, I'll be telling you a little bit about the history of Alexa. We went to the archives, we dug out some old pictures, and we got a whole bunch of cameras to show you. So sit back and enjoy this. Now, we're here in our ARRI studio in Munich, and I'm the only one not wearing a face mask. The whole rest of the crew is wearing face masks. We're following all the corona precautions. And let me briefly introduce you to our crew. There's Henning, he's our director. We have Rosie, our producer. Annalena is in marketing, and she's also collecting the questions. If you want to, enter questions left, on your right in the screen, enter the questions, and I will answer them at the end. We have Andreas on camera, we have Simon and Florian who are technical directors, and Fred will hand new cameras to me. He also works in camera product development with me. Now, let's get rid of the cake, which I guess we'll eat later. And let's start by going back in time, specifically to mid-2008. In mid-2008, the world was simple. People shot film and they bought film cameras. But then, like this ARRI cam, for instance, but then at the end of 2008, two things happened that made life a lot more difficult. There was the global financial crisis, which meant nobody had money anymore to make movies or buy cameras. And then there was a threatened strike of the Screen Actors Guild. The strike never happened, but it forced everybody to use AFTRA actors from another guild, which have to be shot with a digital camera, an electronic camera, back then they called it. This had two consequences. Consequence number one, we were working on a project, and this is a prototype of this camera we were working on. This was going to be an ARRIFlex 435 high speed. The camera was designed to run at 250 frames a second in 3perf. We had designed a completely new viewfinder for the camera that could accept 435 or ARRICam eyepieces, and we designed a new interface, a new user interface, which you can see here on this side, may seem a little familiar to you. Now, at the fall of 2008, nobody bought film cameras anymore, so we actually had to shelve this project. We never built this camera. This is one of the two things that are left. We have this plastic model, and then there's an actual model, a prototype that actually ran off this camera. That was the first result of the global financial crisis and the threatened SAG-AFTRA strike. The second result was that we decided to seriously start the Alexa project. Now, before that, we had already worked on the ARRI scan and the ARRI laser. We looked very carefully at how film makes images, what makes a good image. We'd analyzed that, and we also had 5 years of experience under our belt with the ARRIFlex D20 and the D21. So we had a pretty good idea what people liked about digital cameras and what they didn't like. For instance, when we started the D20 project in 2000, we had no idea if people would want a video assist on top of the digital camera or not. With the D20, we learned people don't. Everybody thought they did. Once they used it, they ignored the video assist and they just used the live image from the digital camera. So, when you're building a camera, you're going to work at multiple fronts at the same time. You're going to try to parallelize all the things you do. The one thing you're going to do is you're going to talk to your customers. So we have a long tradition of talking to DPs, to DITs, to camera assistants, to rental houses, directors, producers, visual effects artists, to learn what they want in a new product. I personally conducted a whole number of focus groups with cameramen and camera assistants to learn what they want to see in a digital camera. And then you start development on the actual hardware. So here's a picture of the, one too far. Here's a picture of the electronics and the sensor of the Alexa at the early stages. Now, once we had the sensor running and we could see the image that came out of it, we got very, very excited, because this sensor had and has the widest dynamic range of anything out there. Also, the color reproduction was fantastic. So we were very, very happy about that. Then, once you have that, you try to put all these electronics together in something we call the Alexa Sensor Demonstrator. It's an aluminum box here that you'll see later. And at the same time, we also try to test mechanical components of the camera. So here we have the row of connectors on the back of Alexa. We spend a lot of time figuring out which connector should we wear, how can we place them so you can easily remove them. So for instance, we interspersed connectors you use a lot with connectors you don't use a lot, so you can get better access to the connectors. Here's a mechanical model of the door You may notice this is a bigger door than the one we ultimately ended up in the camera, because camera assistant told us sometimes there's not enough space to have such a big door on a camera. And then here is a model of the user interface for the Alexa. This was an early design. You'll see that in the actual Alexa, the user interface is a lot more refined. Here we have a drawing of the cooling concept of the Alexa. This is actually close to what we ended up using. Please note that on the top and the back we have these really serious dovetails that were meant for an ARRI digital magazine we never built. On the other side of the camera you can see we're wrestling with where do we place the connectors, how is this all going to work. This camera has a very strange exhaust on the lower left corner that never was built like that. But you can get the idea how we're trying to put all these components together. At the same time, we also did design studies. Here's an early design study that still has the digital magazine on the right. It has the mirror shutter, and you can see the vents at the top and the bottom of this camera. One of the big questions was, how do we best cool the camera? Another design had the idea of having radiator fins on the top of the camera. That's that black stuff on the top of the camera you see. And also notice on this camera here still had a ARRIFlex 435 style control panel on the left side. Here was an idea on how we could cool the sensor. This was called the Elvis option, which luckily never got built because I think it's pretty ugly. But when you have all these things, once you have the electronic boards, you know the size of the sensor board, you know all the mechanical components, what they should look like. You try to put them together in a prototype design, which is this here. And this looks pretty much close to the actual Alexa. You note there's still the bigger door there. Now, we also shoot a lot of tests. Usually, we used to shoot a lot of film tests. Then we shot film tests in comparison to 2/3 inch video cameras. And here we had the Alexa sensor demonstrator. That's that second box, the aluminum box. And we shot that in comparison to the D21 and the competitor. At the top left, you see DP Oliver Meyer, and to the right of him is then project leader Achim Oehler. And then came the IBC 2009. And at the IBC 2009, you see there my colleague Milan, who's been with the project for a long time. But for this show, we asked ourselves, how can we show this great dynamic range of the camera? And we came up with what is called the tower. You see that on the left. Inside is a silver car that's lit with very high contrast light. On one end, the Alexa sensor demonstrator looks inside and captures this image. And on the other side, there was a little slot where a human could peek inside to verify that that's actually what happened inside. And to the left of that was an Alexa video viewfinder that allowed you to see that the Alexa actually was able to capture this dynamic range. This created quite a stir at the show. At the same time, we had a special room where I did demonstrations and presentations of the Alexa camera system. And here you see a very young Glenn Kennel on the left. He's now the president of ARRI USA. In the middle, you see John Fowler, the publisher of the Film Digital Times. And on the right side is a much younger version of myself. We're holding the 3 different camera models we decided to produce. Now, the Alexa was a big hit at the IBC 2009, and we got a lot of requests of people who wanted to shoot with it. Even though the product wasn't out yet, people already wanted to shoot with it. We usually try not to do that because you don't want prototypes out on the sets, but under some circumstances we do that. And for this project, we actually decided to do that. This was called Anonymous, shot by Anna Förster, director Roland Emmerich. They used the first prototypes of the Alexa before the final camera was released, and they were very, very happy with it. And to this day, I think one of the reasons Alexas can deal so well with fire is that this was a movie about Shakespeare. It was all candles and torches and fireplaces. And we had engineers on the set actually talking to the DP, and the DP was saying, look, this candle, I have a little bit here, it's a little too bright. So the engineers went back, they changed the software. I think that's in the DNA of the Alexa camera. Next happened NAB 2010. And as you can see by this photo here, it was pandemonium. The booth was totally packed. And not only were people very interested, they also were ordering hundreds of Alexas. Here you see our late colleague Bill Lovell, who worked very hard and worked a lot on the D20 and the D21 and did a lot for the Alexa. He's explaining the camera to a customer here. At the same time, we also shot a lot of tests and we shot a lot of show reels. Here is cinematographer Stijn van der Wecken, in Berlin on a beer bicycle, driving down Unter den Eichen to shoot one of the showreels. And here you see behind the camera cinematographer Tom Fehrmann, who's been advising us a lot in the past and still on camera development. He shot the Violin Maker showreel for the Alexa. And then here we have a very special show. This was a Honda commercial in Los Angeles that was shot on film by Bill Bennett. Bill is a gentleman on the right in the black cap, and we had provided him with a prototype of the Alexa, and he asked his friend Kees van Ostrom, he's the gentleman with the gray hair on the left, to shoot in parallel. Now, Kees by now is the president of the American Society of Cinematographers. Bill is the vice president. Back then, they shot with the Alexa and the 435 film camera in parallel. The Honda commercial was a silver Honda in the California sunlight, something Bill told me later no digital camera at the time could properly capture. And when they went into post-production, they did what they always did. They spent 6 hours color grading the the film images, and then they went to the Alexa images. And after just a couple of minutes of color grading the Alexa images, the room went very quiet, and Bill said, I talked to him yesterday night on the phone, he said, the colorist said, oh my God. Because the Alexa images not only were very easy to color grade, but they looked as good as the film image. They did a split screen, they could barely tell the difference. Everybody in the room, and there were more people there, Rodney Charters was there, said Bill, and David Darby was also there, they said they knew it was a game changer. And Bill actually went and he immediately called ARRI Burbank and ordered his first Alexa camera. So the Alexa started out as a camera system with 3 cameras, 2 Allura studio zooms, which also were big hits and still are, many, many accessories specifically designed for the Alexa, and all the workflow tools that have to go along with it. I'm going to run you down all the Alexa models now. Here is the first Alexa, the Alexa Classic Eevee. It has a 16:9 sensor. You can record on this side here. We have the recording bay. You can record ProRes onto SPS Pro cards. And on the back here, we have connectors that spit out either an SDI signal or an ARRI raw signal on something we call T-Link. Now, there was no way to record the ARRI raw in the camera itself, so you needed an external recorder, like, for instance, this Codex onboard recorder here. And you can see that the camera plus the Codex onboard recorder are quite a beast. But high-end feature films would use ARRI raw, and they use the Codex onboard recorder. That was in 2010. Then in 2011, we added a second camera. This is the Alexa Classic Plus. It has a different side cover here on the right side that allowed us to wirelessly remote control the camera as well as lenses. In 2012, we added another camera yet, the Alexa Classic Studio. The Classic Studio is the only digital camera ever built that has a rotating mirror shutter like film cameras did and an optical viewfinder. A lot of cameramen were very used to the optical viewfinder, and they were very happy to have an option that still provided an optical viewfinder. The Studio also had a 4x3 sensor, which is perfect for shooting with anamorphic lenses. After the Alexa Studio, in 2012, came the Alexa M, consisting of 2 parts. We took the chainsaw and we chopped an Alexa Plus apart, and then we connected the 2 parts with a fiber optic cable. This was a product that was very, very popular for 3D shooting because you could mount the head into a 3D rig, and then the body would sit with the 3D supervisor. Now, that's the Alexa Classic camera system. A lot of movies have been shot with the Alexa Classics. The first movie that was shot with the Alexa Classic was a movie called Hugo, shot by Bob Richardson, who is currently still using Alexas. He's shooting Venom 2 with an Alexa 65 and Alexa Mini LF, and another movie called In Time, shot by Roger Deakins, who's also still using Alexas. He just finished. We have all seen, hopefully, 1917, that was shot with 2 prototypes of the Mini LF camera. At the very beginning, there was also a small television series in Ireland called Game of Thrones. And in fact, the very first episode of Game of Thrones was shot with one of the very first Alexas that came off the ARRI manufacturing line. Through all 8 seasons, they continued to use the Alexa for Game of Thrones. They would upgrade their cameras, but they've stayed very loyal to the camera. And I think looking at Game of Thrones, it's a fantastic looking show. Since then, many, many TV series have been shot with Alexa: Sherlock, Umbrella Academy, Altered Carbon, Peaky Blinders, Mozart in the Jungle, Haunting of Hill House. The list goes on and on and on. Many, many more. So after 10 years, a lot of the DPs who started with the Alexa are still using the Alexa, which shows, I think, as a testament to the image quality of the Alexa, because that's what the DP really wants. The camera is a tool to get an image, and if the image is good, the DP will continue using the camera. But also, a lot of the Alexa Classic cameras are still in use, many of them with over 10,000 hours of use. They're still out there, still being used as cameras, still shooting feature films, television series, and commercials. And that's a testament to the robustness of the design of the camera. And it's also a fantastic investment. If you bought an Alexa 10 years ago, it's a fantastic investment. You made a lot of money. And that also shows you that buying an Alexa camera right now would still be a very, very good investment. Now, we asked ourselves, of course, what made the Alexa so popular? And there are three questions to answer. First, it's what we call the best overall image quality. The Alexa to this day still has the highest dynamic range, it has the best color science, and shows the best skin tones. And that is because of the pixel design. The Alexa pixel design is a brilliant design, and that's what the sensor is made out of. And I've actually brought you some sensors here to show you what the actual sensor of the Alexa looks like. Here we have an Alexa mini sensor that's Super 35 sized, the same size sensor that's also in the regular Alexa. Then here's the sensor that's used in the Alexa LF that is twice the size of the Super 35 Alexa. It's actually slightly larger than full frame. And here we have an Alexa 65 sensor. This is 3 times the size of a Super 35 sensor and used in the Alexa 65. Now, the second reason why Alexas were so popular is they're very easy to use. A lot of people were afraid to use digital camera in 2010, 2011, when digital really started to take off. But the Alexas were designed like film cameras. They look like film cameras. One DP said they taste like film cameras. They smell like film cameras. And they gave people a safe feeling. Crews knew how to operate them. They're very easy to operate. And that was another advantage. And I think the third advantage is we designed the camera so it can be easily upgraded. In the course of the life of the Alexa, we had a lot of software updates that always gave the cameras new capabilities. And we also came out with new versions, new generations of Alexa cameras. For instance, the Alexa XT generation of cameras. Here we have an Alexa XT Eevee. Eevee, by the way, stands for Electronic Viewfinder. This camera, the XT cameras, took the codecs onboard recorder, and in cooperation with codecs, we incorporated the whole onboard recorder into the camera. On this side of the camera, you now see a new side cover where you can put codecs capture drives in. This allowed you to capture ARRI RAW in camera. And with the Alexa XT camera, ARRI RAW became much, much more popular. Previously, ARRI RAW was being used on large feature films. With the XT cameras, ARRI RAW was being used on commercials a lot more, but also on smaller feature films. The XT family of camera, by the way, also all had a 4x3 sensor and was available as an Eevee, as a Plus, as a Studio, and as an M camera. All right, then in 2014, we introduced the Amira. The Amira has the same sensor as the Alexa camera, so it gives you the same image quality, but the ergonomic design is different. This camera was designed to be popped on the shoulder. This camera was designed if you want to shoot documentary style, if you want to shoot something, you don't have the big budget, don't have a big crew, that's the perfect camera for you. And in fact, still being bought, still being used today, the Amira, and we're now also working on a multicam Amira system, which allows you to use the Amira in a TV studio type application. And I know a lot of events are being shot with this, a lot of concerts are being shot with this. It's something that I think is coming. The Amira was followed in 2015 by the Alexa 65. This is the camera that used the larger sensor. The sensor needed a little bit more cooling, so the camera's a little bit larger. There aren't that many of this in the world. I think we have about 70 Alexa 65 cameras in the world. But this camera is what essentially started the whole large format. And the Alexa 65 was also followed in 2015 by the Alexa Mini. Now the Alexa Mini has the same sensor as the Alexa, but it is tiny, it is lightweight, it is super versatile. I think this is our best seller. We've sold more Alexa Minis than any other of the cameras. The Alexa Mini is being used in Hollywood on big feature films as A cameras, as B cameras, as C cameras. They're being used in the drone, but they're also being used by small production companies who just want to have one camera, and that's the only camera they have. And you can build it up to a big A camera, or you can just pop it on the shoulder and go shoot a documentary. Very, very popular camera. The Alexa Mini then in 2016 was followed by the Alexa SXT family. SXT stands for Super Extended Technology. XT stood for Extended Technology. And the Alexa SXT cameras had a lot more processing power. So we could run some recording formats at a higher frame rate. We introduced a whole lot of new recording formats, including one that took a 3.4K image and up-resed it in camera to 4K. And we were able to do a much better, much more transparent and easy look management workflow with this camera. It also came as a W version that has a built-in wireless here in the back, built-in wireless video. All right, XST. And then came 2018. And in 2018, we introduced a completely new camera system based on the Alexa LF sensor, so a large format sensor. But we didn't just introduce the Alexa LF camera. We also introduced the signature prime lenses. We introduced the LPL lens mount, which you can see here, which is a much larger lens mount than the regular PL mount lenses. We introduced the LDS2 lens data system, workflow tools, everything you need to shoot large format. The camera itself is based on the SXT camera. It has the wireless video built in the back, and it can go up to 150 frames a second in the full width of large format. That's something very unique. And then in 2019, we had, by popular demand, a mini version of the LF. This is the Alexa Mini LF. This is right now our best seller. Before the coronavirus hit, a lot of people were shooting with this camera. It was being used on a lot of television shows. It was also being used on a lot of feature films, including Dune, The Batman, Venom 2, and then television shows Stranger Things, Outlander 5, Umbrella Academy, Altered Carbon. A lot of people use this camera. Now, since we introduced these cameras, a ton of television shows have been done with these cameras. A ton of movies, a ton of commercials, documentaries, everything you can think of. And these shows have also won some awards. Here is a little list of some of the Oscars won by projects shot with Alexa cameras. But the camera itself has also won awards. So here you have a picture of the ARRI crew in 2017 picking up a technical Oscar. This is called a Scientific and Engineering Achievement Award from the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences. And in 2018, the Alexa won an Engineering Emmy from the Television Academy. Alexas are used in all kinds of projects worldwide, and I also brought you some pictures of Alexas being used all over the globe. Starting with Reed Moreno here, shooting with an Alexa in full, I see this, everything on this camera that you can put on a camera, up on the ladder there in the USA. Here is Snow White Deer Plain, a TV show from China, being shot with Alexa XT and Alexa M in master anamorphics. Here we have a shot from the set of Bahubali, which is India's biggest movie, shot with Alexa XT, master primes, and an ARRI RAW. Here we have a television show being shot in Japan. We have Checo Varese in Chile shooting the 33, which was about the minor accident that happened. Here we have ADP having a really good time in Turkey with a mini LF. This is cinematographer Neville Kidd in Canada shooting with an Alexa 65, the Umbrella Academy. This last season was shot with Alexa 65, Alexa LF, and Alexa Mini LF. El Cid is a feature film being shot in Spain. Here is a project being shot in Italy, a commercial being shot in France. This is a shot taken on the set of Dark. That's a German Netflix television series being shot, interestingly enough, on Alexa 65 with ultra prime lenses. And here we have Steinman again shooting Outlander 5 with an Alexa Mini LF and an Alexa LF. Alexa cameras have been used in the salt flats of Bolivia. They've been used on the beaches of Australia. They've been used in the air. They've been used underwater. They've been used on top of the mountains and in the snow. This is a photo I love. It's a photo of Rolf Steinman, who's a nature cinematographer. He was shooting a lot in cold climates, and I asked him once, Rolf, what's the workflow you use? He said, oh, that's very simple. I shoot all day in the cold, and then I come into my tent, I turn on my Bunsen burner, and I hold my laptop over my Bunsen burner and move it back and forth slowly until it gets warm enough that I can start it and put the cards in to download them. Alexas are being used in the scorching heat of the desert, and sometimes things go wrong. Apparently cranes on cars is generally a bad idea, especially if you run them into walls, or other cars, as the people at Mad Max Fury Road did. Camera trucks sometimes burn down, and it's bad if you leave the camera inside. However, we actually got hold of this camera, and when we turned it on, it ran fine and produced normal images. Some of our customers really wanted to test the strength of our battery mount, which I think withstood the test, and others had very innovative ideas about how to power the camera. We had some interesting ideas on what kind of recording media to use. For those who don't know what this is a cassette tape. That's what you would put into a Walkman. Anybody too young, please Google what a Walkman was. And then other people got confused about the proper use of camera accessories. Or maybe he's bringing his lunch to the set, I'm not sure. This crew really worked hard on the fusion of man and machine, and the final fusion of man and machine was achieved with my favorite Halloween costume, the Man Mini LF. Now, that was the little romp through history. If you want to learn more about the Alexa, we put some links up in the comments section, and including a link to a 10 years Alexa webpage where you have a little summary of the history and some other links, including a link to a 15-minute cut of all the show reels of the Alexa. It's really, really a very cool reel. Take a look at it. I looked at it yesterday. I kind of got nostalgic seeing all these old shows. Thank you everyone for working with us, for using the Alexas, for making it such a success. It's been fun, and I hope we're going to have a lot more fun in the next 10 minutes. And I think now we're going to go to questions and answers.
Thank you, Mark. I'm coming here from the background and asking and bringing in some questions which I saw. Interesting questions, actually. A couple are about color.
Okay.
One is, how does the Alexa look and feel depart from film? Maybe we start with that one.
Oh, that's an interesting one. At first, we fashioned the Alexa to be as close to film as possible. So we try to achieve the same skin tones, the same roll-off and the highlights. But at some point, we realized that we can actually do more. And where we get more is you get more information in the dark parts of the image. So the Alexa can look much, much more in the dark parts of the image. And when I see a film now, I notice it because the blacks sometimes are pretty crushed. So you get actually more exposure latitude in the black parts of the image. Plus, I think the image is a little more malleable. You can do a little more with it in post-production.
A similar question was, what care did ARRI took to translate film color science to digital? And it comes to my mind, the project which we had, which we call the Alexa Faces. And also maybe you want to talk shortly about Loxi.
Okay, sure. Well, I think the important thing here is that we worked on a film scanner and the ARRI laser, which records digital images back out to film. So we had to dig really, really deep and understand how images are being put onto film and how film makes a really good looking image. The same people that did that did the color science for the Alexa. So all their deep knowledge of how film works and how film images work went into the Alexa. Now, when you scan a piece of film, what you get is essentially an image that has a very flat tonal curve. And we call that log C. The C stands for Cineon. Cineon is the old Kodak project trying to figure out how to digitize images. And that allows you to transport a lot of the dynamic range from the scene, record it, and then give the DP a lot of options in post-production on how to do the post-production.
Somebody says, just thank you for bringing us that cameras to the market and to use them. He's the owner of an Alexa Mini LF.
Well, you're very welcome. I love my job. I'm having great fun doing this, and I think a lot of people here at ARRI do as well. So this is fun. Thank you, though.
And then comes the question why this camera had that name and why Amira had that name. That's a good one.
Okay. Whenever we start a project at ARRI, the engineer has to book their hours somewhere. And the person who was booking the hours needs to come up with a code name for the project, so not everybody knows what the project is. And that person named the Alexa project codename Alexa. So everybody at ARRI forever has been calling this camera Alexa. Once it came time to release the product, we asked everybody what the name should be, and I came up with a whole bunch of numbers and letters similar to ARRIFlex 435, and just turned out everybody already called it Alexa. It was such a great name, so we stuck with it, and I think it was a wonderful thing. Once we had Alexa, then we looked for similar names for the next camera, and Amira actually, I think in Persian means the little princess, which seemed perfect for us. It's the little sister of Alexa, so that's how the name of the Amira was coined. I don't know that we're going to find any other good names from here on out, so if you have a good idea for a good name for a camera, please let us know.
Difference between ARRI RAW and ProRes.
Ooh, the difference between ARRI RAW and ProRes. ARRI RAW essentially is the raw data from the sensor captured without having any processing applied. This is cool because this means you can change things in post-production. You can change the color balance in post-production. You can change the sensitivity in post-production. All this stuff can be done in post-production. But it also means you need an extra step in post-production to get to a normal color image. ProRes does all this in camera. So the look gets burned in, the ProRes look gets burned into the image, which means you immediately have the image, you can edit it, you can then distribute it, you can send it on the air, but you can't change as much anymore as you can change with ARRI RAW. ARRI RAW is great for larger projects. ARRI RAW is great if you want to archive your footage. If that's important to you, do shoot ARRI RAW, because as people come out with new ways of creating color images out of the ARRI RAW, the result will improve. ProRes is great if you want a quick result.
The future of storage media.
Ooh, the future of storage, that's a good question.
I'm sorry to give you this pain.
No, that's a really good question. Storage media is an interesting point. I've been hearing for the last 10 years, oh, it's all going to go in the cloud, it's all going to go in the cloud. But turns out what we're doing is really, really cutting edge. We always have very, very high data rate. And the regular storage media cards you can buy at your electronics store don't work because the data rate requirements we have are so high. That's why we always need really, really high performance media, and that's why we work close together with codecs, because they make very special high performance media that's specially selected RAM, specially selected flash memory, special type of controller software in a special enclosure. It's nothing you can just buy off the shelf and put together. And so I don't know that that's going to change. In my opinion, we're going to have capture drives for quite a while longer.
A double question, or I combine the questions. Are we going to make a still camera? And are we going to make a camera which runs 300 frames in large format?
All right, are we going to make a still camera? Very likely not. I think that's a market that is in decline right now. The DSLR market is in decline because the iPhone is, everybody's shooting photos on the iPhone, and I don't think we want to compete with Apple on that. And the second question was, are we going to make a 300 frames per second LF camera? And I don't think in the near future, because there's a lot of data running through this camera. And as I mentioned proudly, the Alexa LF can go 150, but the much smaller Mini LF in open gate can only go 40 frames a second. At a different format, it goes 60, but because it's so small, we can't cool it to allow faster frames per second. So 300 frames per second large format camera would have to be twice as big as the Alexa LF, and I don't think you want that.
Can you tell us a bit about the ARRI Blue?
I don't know what that is.
That's our blue.
The ARRI Blue?
Yeah.
No.
I think it's HKS 43.
Okay, Henning says it's Pantone HKS 43. That's the ARRI Blue.
Okay, so when will a new camera come?
New camera. Well, we're always working on new cameras, and we have a new camera in development right now. It'll probably be released at some point next year. This is a Super 35 camera. We strongly believe that there's a place in the world for large format, and there's a place in the world for Super 35. So we have a large format camera system in place now. Now we're working on a new Super 35 camera. This camera will have a Super 35 4K sensor, and we've always said we're only going to come out with a new Super 35 4K camera if we can make the image quality as good or better than the Alexa image quality. The camera will be about the size of the Mini LF. It will use the same viewfinder as the Mini LF, and it will also be able to accept the same media as the Mini LF uses.
Difference between photosites and pixels.
Good question. Yes. Technically, if you want to be so particular, now I'm known for being very anal retentive and very meticulous and particular about things. So a photosite is the actual light-sensitive area on a sensor that converts a light into a voltage, which later on gets digitized and then becomes an image. A pixel, the word actually means picture element. That is what you have once you've recorded something. So on the sensor, you have photosites that capture the light, and then once an image gets made out of that through processing and gets recorded, then you have actual pixels. Sensor technically does not have pixels, and a recorded file does not have photosites. Thank you very much for asking that question.
Can you explain science between the different sensor formats, aspect ratios, 155 and 2.11 on the Alexa 65?
On the Alexa 60, well, the Alexa 65 has a sensor that is very wide, and you can actually crop different parts of the sensor out. What that does is it gives you a lower data rate. So I was mentioning the movie Dark earlier. Dark is being shot with an Alexa 65 and ultra-prime lenses, and they're covering a 5K image on the Alexa 65, which is slightly larger than large format. That's the real difference. I mean, the pixels are the, just made the mistake myself. The photosites are the same on all the formats. You just crop different parts of the image.
A more specific question is, did we have or were we inspired by a specific film stock brand when we do the calibration and color science for the Alexa sensor?
I don't think so. I don't think we were looking at a specific film stock, but we were looking at how does film portray highlights, what's the roll-off in highlights specifically, what's the dynamic range, and how do skin tones get portrayed? Because film does a fantastic job of portraying skin tones. One thing that maybe is worth mentioning, we looked very, very closely at the grain of film. Because the grain, it has kind of a dithering effect. It makes all film look very, very pretty. And we looked at the Alexa sensor, and so in the basic hardware design of the sensor, we've already designed how the noise of the Alexa would look, which is a randomly distributed noise with a coloring that is similar to film grain. And I think that is really, really important to make pleasing images. It's an often overlooked part of the image is the noise.
An Alexa Mini LF user or owner would like to have 50 frames per second in ARRI RAW.
I know. Me too. The times I've asked the engineers, why can't you do this? There are limitations as to how fast we can run the sensor before the sensor board gets too hot. That's really the difference between the Mini LF and the Alexa LF. The Alexa LF has a different sensor board that allows you to run faster, but it also creates a lot more heat. So you need a bigger camera to actually cool it down. The Alexa Mini, we told the engineers it must be the size of a Mini. And they said, okay, but then you'll get lower frames per second. And that's just what we have to do. I ask them almost every day, but every day I get the same answer. It is just not possible. Honestly, I think the Mini LF will stay at the frames per second that it is right now.
So the Alexa cameras are made in Germany products. A question comes in, a delicate question. Are the sensors also coming from Germany?
That's an interesting question. So the sensor is a German design. It's our design. We own the sensor design. We own the pixel design. But the sensor is made somewhere else and then sent somewhere else in the world to have the color filter array applied, sent somewhere else in the world to be chopped up. But by now we have our own clean room where we actually do the bonding of the sensor, which is the connecting the sensor to the actual electronic boards it sits on. So it comes from a lot of different places in the world, as do most electronics in any product these days. However, a lot of the mechanical parts are being machined here in Munich, and the final assembly of all the parts is done in Munich. All the testing is done in Munich. So the Alexa is a made in Germany product.
So I just received an email by somebody who was asking about HDR, because he obviously was grading older Alexa footage, and it was capable of being graded in HDR. How comes that? This might be kind of the last question.
Yes. All right. That's a good question. HDR, or high dynamic range, is something that came about, I would say 2 or 3 years ago in the displays. Alexas have always captured high dynamic range. It just wasn't possible to display the high dynamic range the Alexa captured in the past. Once the displays got better, once we got HDR TV screens, once we got laser projectors in the movie theaters, we were able to see the image the Alexa has always captured. Anything captured with any Alexa or Amira is automatically HDR, and so you can take that footage and easily go into post, make an HDR master out of it, and then show it on modern HDR displays. All right, I'm being told that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Stay healthy and have a good time. Bye-bye.